syntax analysis. Have you heard this term, syntax analysis? If you have heard the term, which phase of the compiler is this syntax analysis phase? And what exactly happens in this phase of the compiler? So how many phases are there in the compiler?
6.
Yeah?
6.
Okay. Now, which is the first phase of the compiler?
Lexical analysis.
Lexical. Lexical analysis. Right. So who is doing this lexical analysis and what exactly happens in the lexical analysis phase? In the lexical analysis phase, the input is taken and it is broken down into smaller units called as the tokens. Okay, the input is taken and this input is broken down into smaller units called as the tokens, and these tokens are passed to the second phase, which is called as the syntax analysis phase. Now we'll see how exactly your syntax analysis phase looks like, what will be the input to the syntax analysis phase and what will be the output of this phase. So lexical analyzer does the job of the lexical analysis, that is taking the actual input, breaking down into smaller units called as tokens. And who is doing the syntax analysis? The syntax analysis is done by a component or a system software called as the parser, or it is called as the syntax analyzer. Okay, so syntax analysis is done by the syntax analyzer, or it is called as the parser. So the syntax analysis phase is also called as the parser phase or the syntax analyzer phase. So what is the input to this parser? You can see here, lexical analyzer is there, parser is there, and the rest of the front end. When I say rest of the front end, is the remaining phases of the compiler. Okay, so the lexical analyzer is going to take the source program. It is going to break down this input into smaller units called as the tokens. So ma'am has explained the difference between tokens, lexemes. Okay, so the smaller units of the input are called as tokens, and these tokens are passed or given to the parser, which is the syntax analysis phase. What is the job of the parser? What is the role of the parser? So this parser is going to perform two different operations. One is, first of all, checking for the errors, and the second job is to construct the parse tree from the given grammar, for the given grammar, and pass this parse tree to the rest of the phases of the compiler. So what is the role of the parser here? The parser performs two different operations. One operation is, it first of all checks for the errors. Okay, in the later on slides, we will see what are the different types of errors that the parser checks for. Okay, so the first job is to check for the errors, and meanwhile, it constructs a parse tree using the grammar for a given input string, and then it passes to the rest of the phases of the compiler. So in the meantime, it is checking for the symbol table. I think even the concept of symbol table was explained to you by ma'am. Okay, just remember what is the role of the parser. It is going to perform two operations. One is, it's going to take the tokens, construct the parse tree, and pass it on to the rest of the phases of the compiler, along with checking for the errors. Now we'll see what are the different types of errors that are taken care by the parser. Okay, so syntax error handling. This job is taken care by the syntax analyzer or the syntax analysis phase. Okay, so these errors are commonly occurring errors, and they have been put under different levels. One such level is the lexical error level. The next is the syntactic errors, and the third one is the semantic errors, and the last one is the logical errors. In case, yeah, everybody would have executed your C programs, your high level programming language instructions. So when you execute, when you write the program and try to compile the program, have you come across all these kind of errors? You must have come across these kind of errors: syntax error or syntactic error. So who is generating, who is putting this message to the user? It is this phase of the compiler which is doing these jobs. Okay, so checking for the error, categorizing what type of error it is. Now coming to each type of the error here. What is meant by lexical errors? Lexical error is when you misplace the spelling. Instead of, say suppose you are declaring a variable called as sum, int sum. Okay, so sum is the name of the identifier or the variable. You have declared it as SUM, and when you're using that identifier or the variable, you are using it as UMS. UMS. Is it correct? It is not correct because you have declared it as SUM and you are using that as UMS, which is an incorrect variable or an incorrect identifier declaration. Okay, so when you are declaring an identifier or a variable in a position but using a different identifier in another point of time in the program, then such kind of errors are called as lexical errors. Okay, misplacing of characters in the identifier, that is you have declared something else and you're using something else. Such kind of errors are called as lexical errors. And the second type of error is a syntactic error. So what is a syntactic error? Say suppose all your C statements should terminate with a semicolon. All your C statements should terminate with a semicolon. Or if you're using a for loop, each of those components, that is incrementing, condition, initialization, all these three fields should be separated by a semicolon. Say suppose you are missing a comma in a printf statement, or you are missing a semicolon at the end of the printf statement or an executable instruction, then such kind of errors are termed as syntactic errors. Okay, missing some of the punctuation marks that are used as part of the programming language will come under the category of syntactic errors. Okay, coming to the third type of error, semantic error. Semantic error is a common type of semantic error is you would have come across the typecasting. Okay, you'd have come across the typecasting. So you have a facility to typecast a lower type variable to a higher type, or a higher type variable to a lower type based upon the requirement. Okay, when you typecast a variable and there is some mistake, you cannot typecast it. Okay, so such kind of errors will come under the category of semantic errors. And any of the errors which do not belong to the above three types of errors, either lexical, syntactic, or semantic errors, will come under the category of logical errors. Logical is when you're not using a proper logic and you're not getting the output, then obviously it is called as a logical error. So a familiar logical error is your segmentation fault. People get segmentation fault, right? What is the segmentation fault? When your program is not working properly, you cannot categorize it either to lexical errors or a syntactic error or a semantic error. When there is error in the logic, okay, then such kind of errors are categorized to the logical errors. Okay, so we'll move on to the next topic, error recovery. When such kind of errors occur, how exactly the compiler is going to recover from such kind of errors? Okay, so there are 4 different strategies how a compiler is going to come out of those errors. How the compiler is going to come out of those errors. Okay, it's displaying the error, finding out the error, and then displaying the error to the user, and it has to continue with its job, right? So how it will recover from an error is nothing but the error recovery strategies. So you have 4 main error recovery strategies: panic mode recovery, phrase level recovery, error productions, and global corrections. I would insist you people to go through these 4 different types of error recovery strategies because this topic is completely theory. Okay, this topic is completely theory, and most probably it is an expected question. You can go through error recovery strategies in a syntax analysis phase. Okay, any doubts you have so far? Yeah, any doubts? Shall we move ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes.
hope this diagram is clear to everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And different types of syntax error handling and error recovery strategies. You have to go through each and every type, how exactly the compiler is going to recover from the errors. Okay, now coming to the actual topic of the syntax analysis phase. What is the job of the syntax analysis phase? It performs 2 different operations, as I said: finding out the errors in the given input program or the given input instructions. And the second job is to construct a parse tree, and pass this parse tree to the next phases of the compiler. So for constructing the parse tree, what is required? You have already done in your lab. Have you come across the YARC programs in your lab? Yes, you have executed the Yak programs. So this Yak is called as the parser. Yak is called as the parser. Your Lex is called as the lexer. All your Lex programs are performing what job? They are taking the input, they are breaking down the input into smaller units called as tokens. And this is the reason when you write a Yak program, you are not writing just the dot y program. You are also writing the dot L program, because your dot y program needs input of tokens. From where do you get the input of tokens? From where do you get the tokens? You get it from the lexer. The input is given to the lexer. This lexer breaks down the input into smaller units called as the tokens, and these tokens are passed to the parser. Your Yak, yet another compiler is an example of a parser. So what do you have mainly in a parser program or your Yak program? You have a grammar. Yes. If you were supposed to find out, if the given arithmetic expression is valid or not, you made use of a grammar called as E derives E plus E, or E derives E plus E, or E into E, or E divided by E, or E enclosed within parenthesis. That was the grammar that was given to you. Based upon that grammar, the input was taken and it was parsed. Okay. So what is this actual parsing? Parsing is deriving the string from the given grammar. So what is a parse tree? For parsing, you need a parse tree. What is this parse tree? Parse tree is nothing but a pictorial representation of these derivations. Okay, pictorial representation of the derivations using the grammar is called as a parse tree. Fine. So basically the parsers are of three different types. There are three different types of parsers, very important. Three different types of parsers are universal parser, top-down parsers, and bottom-up parsers. Okay, so universal parser example is Lee's algorithm, and you have one more universal parser algorithm. But these universal parser algorithms are not efficient. They are not efficient, and they can parse any grammar. The advantage is they can parse any grammar. That is, it need not have only context-free grammar, but it can have it can parse any type of grammar. That is the advantage. But the disadvantage is, compared to the top down and the bottom up parsers, the universal parsers are inefficient, and that is the reason we don't make use of the universal parsers. Okay. And the second type of parser is the top-down parser. Example of a top-down parser is your LL parsers. We'll see what exactly is LL parser. You have the problems for these parsing method. Okay. And the third type is called as the bottom-up parser. The example for the bottom-up parser are LR parsers. As the name itself indicates, top-down parser is going to start from the root, the parse tree. It's going to start from the root and go down towards the leaf nodes. Okay, the parsing starts from the root and goes down to the leaf nodes in the parse tree. But bottom up is the reverse of the top down method. That is, it starts from the leaf nodes and parses or reduces up towards the root node. Okay, as the name itself indicates, in top down parsers, the parse trees are constructed from the root node to the leaf nodes in top down, and in case of bottom up, the tree is constructed from the leaf nodes and moves up towards the root node. Okay, that is, in top down, from start symbol you are trying to reduce the string, but in bottom up you are taking the string and going up towards the start symbol. That's the only difference between the top down and bottom up parsers. And the examples are LL parsers for top down and LR parsers for bottom up parsers. Okay, so this is the categorization of the parser. The parsers are basically of two different types. We are not considering the universal parsers just because they are inefficient and they can parse any type of grammar. They are inefficient, so we consider only the two different types of parsers. One is the top-down parser and the other is the bottom-up parser. These two types of parsers along with the example problems you have for your syllabus. Okay. So parsers are basically of two different types, top-down and bottom-up parser. And top-down parsers again can be classified as parsers with backtracking and parsers without backtracking. Okay, what is this backtracking and no backtracking? You would have come across in your algorithm subject what is exactly backtracking. Coming down and going back to the previous level of the parse tree. Here with respect to this subject, coming down to the next level and again going back to the previous level of the higher level of the tree is called as backtracking. And non-backtracking is you don't go back again. Once you come down to a level, you don't go back to the previous level of the parse tree. Okay, so only top-down parsers are of two different types. One with backtracking and the other which do not use backtracking. The one that uses backtracking is called as the recursive descent parser. So here you have recursive descent parser. Top-down parsers are again of two different types. One is that uses backtracking, the other that does not use backtracking. Okay, example for a top-down parser that makes use of backtracking is called as a recursive descent parser, and the top-down parser that does not make use of the backtracking is called as a predictive parser, and example for that predictive parser is your LL1 parser. Okay, hope it is clear. Now coming to the bottom-up parsers. Bottom-up parsers again are of two different types: operator precedence parser and SR parser. SR stands for shift reduce parser. So this shift reduce parser can be of three different types: LR of 0, SLR and LALR. Here you don't have SLR and LALR in your syllabus. You just have the general type of shift reduce parser along with the LR0 parsers in your syllabus. So for any of the parsers, whether it is a top-down parser or a bottom-up parser, your grammar should not be ambiguous. Your grammar should not be ambiguous. So for recursive descent parser or LL1 parser, LR0 parser, your grammar should not be ambiguous grammar. Only for operator precedence parser, the grammar may be ambiguous. The grammar may be ambiguous, but any parser which you'll be studying, that is LL1, RDP or LR0, for all the different types of parsers, your grammar should not be ambiguous. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Shall we move on to the next topic?
Yes,
Any
ma'am.
doubts so far?
No, ma'am.
No.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now I think you are having some knowledge about the ambiguous grammar. When do you call a grammar as ambiguous?
When we can construct two parts.
Yes. When you have more than one parse trees for the given input string. Okay. When you can construct more than one parse trees for the given input string and the grammar, such kind of grammar is called as an ambiguous grammar. Okay. So in this slide, I'll just give you 2 minutes time. You can just go through what each type of grammar is. As I told you, top-down parser, what each type of parser is. Top-down parsers are further categorized, are divided into two types. One is recursive descent parsing, which uses backtracking, and predictive parsing, which does not make use of the backtracking. And the second type of parser was the bottom-up parser, which is further classified into two types: operator precedence parser, which makes use of ambiguous grammar. It is mentioned here, which is able to parse a ambiguous grammar. And the second type of bottom-up parser is a shift-reduce parser. In shift-reduce parser, the grammar should be unambiguous. And shift-reduce, that is SR parsers, can be further classified into 4 types. So here I have listed only 3 different types of SR parsers. You can just have a look at this.
हाँ? एक कसा मी
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
I'll share this PPT. Okay, you need not take down anything. I'll share the PPT. You'll get your turn for writing. Just have a sheet of paper and pen along with you now. Okay, fine. So when I say parsing, two things are very important. Okay. When I say parsing, you need two things in hand. One is the string that you want to parse. A string is nothing but the input that you want to parse. Check if it is in the proper syntax or not. Okay. And if you have to check if the string, the given input string is in proper syntax or not, do you need a grammar for that? Yes. So what kind of grammar you will be using there? It is called as the context-free grammar. I think you have already studied about grammars in your ATC in your previous semester. Okay, this is just a recap of what is a context-free grammar. Okay, so context-free grammar can be defined as, can be called as just a grammar henceforth, because throughout you'll be using only CFG. Okay, so a grammar G is equal to VTPS. What is V? V represents variables, T represents terminals, P is a set of productions, and S is a start state. Okay, so V is a variable. Variable is a non-terminal. All non-terminal symbols are called as variables. All non-terminal symbols are called as variables. And usually what is the notation for variables? It is the uppercase letters. Variables are usually represented using uppercase letters, but you can represent using the lowercase letters also. But only thing, they are all variables. That is non-terminal symbols. Next is terminal symbols. Terminal symbols are those which cannot be further divided. They are the end product. They are the end product. So non-terminals can be further replaced with terminal symbols, but terminal symbols cannot be further replaced with any other symbol, and such kind of symbols are called as terminal symbols. They are usually represented with lowercase letters. Usually you represent it with lowercase letters. And P is a set of productions. P is a set of productions. So here you can find how a production looks like. A derives X. A derives X. So you have the left hand side and you have the right hand side of the production. So the left hand side is always a variable and the right hand side may be a variable or a terminal. Okay. And then every grammar will have a start state or a start symbol. Every grammar will have a start symbol which is represented by S. Okay. So here you have the grammar rules. Here E is a non-terminal or a variable and I is a terminal symbol. E derives E plus E, E derives or E minus E or E into E or E divided by E, and E produces I. I is a terminal symbol and E is a non-terminal or a variable. And as the slide says, terminal symbols are ID and all the operators are also terminal symbols. Okay, and non-terminal is E and the start state is also E in this grammar. So you have for better representation you can use uppercase letters for non-terminals and lowercase letters for terminals. Okay, hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. So now coming to the derivation. Have you all done the leftmost derivation and rightmost derivation in ATC?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think you are familiar with. This is just again a recap of all those concepts. If you have forgotten, this is just a recap. Okay. So what exactly is derivation of the grammar? Okay. So you are given with a string and you are given with the grammar, and based upon the grammar, based upon the string, you are trying to apply the grammar. Based upon the string, you are trying to apply the grammar and trying to reduce step by step. And this process is called as derivation. So here you have the definition for derivation. It is a process of defining a string out of a grammar by application of the rules beginning from the start symbol. Okay, beginning from the start symbol, you are applying one symbol by symbol using the grammar and trying to reduce, and this is called as the derivation. And derivation can be categorized into two forms. One is called as the leftmost derivation and the other is called as the rightmost derivation. Okay, leftmost derivation is starting from the left hand side, each non-terminal on the left hand side, the leftmost side is replaced by a terminal symbol first. Okay, keep moving from left to right, then it is called as LMD, that is leftmost derivation. When you start replacing the non-terminal with a terminal on the right and keep moving from right to left, then it is called as the rightmost derivation. Okay. So this is an example of what is leftmost derivation and rightmost derivation. You can just have a look at this.
ஆமா நான் சரியா போயிருக்க மாட்டேன்னு கண்ணு தெரியாது. ஆமா அவங்க டீட்டெயிலா சொன்ன பிறகு நான் சொன்னதாங்க. இல்லைன்னா நிக்காரு லைன் அனுப்பிச்சு விடுன்றாங்க. ஓடிபி வந்து நில்லுங்க, ஓடிபி தான் நில்லுங்க, ஓடிபி நம்பர் தாங்க போங்க. அப்பதான் உங்களுக்கு ரெஜிஸ்ட்ரேஷன்.
Yuvraj, you can mute yourself and talk. Yeah. Any doubts so far?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
You can unmute and you can ask. No problem. Fine. Hope this is clear to you. This is the derivation. When the same derivation is represented in the form of a tree, then it becomes the parse tree. Okay. When the same derivation is represented in the form of a tree, then it is called as a parse tree.
Parse tree.
The same input string, the same grammar, and it is represented in the form of a tree. So this is the leftmost derivation. The first non-terminal is replaced with the terminal symbol, and then only it moves to the right hand side. Okay, and this is the RMD. Okay, as I was telling you, note down the given grammar. Note down the given grammar. Next time when you are coming for the discussion or for the class, I would insist you to show the derivations. Take down the grammar because you have lot of grammar. How much ever the faculty teaches you, you have to work down in a sheet of paper and you have to solve the problems. Okay. So henceforth, the module 4, the entire module 4 and the module 4 and module 5 are completely problems. Okay. You cannot just sit and look into the video. So you'll have to take down, you'll have to write in a sheet of paper and practice everything. Only then you can follow the instructions. Okay. It is not theory. And what you are supposed to do with this grammar? You know what is LMD, what is RMD, and how to construct a parse tree using LMD and RMD. So this is one of the assignment. So next class when you are coming online for the class, you are supposed to solve this problem and keep ready. I'll be giving you some more problems. Just take down the grammar, the input string. So for this, you're supposed to give the LMD, RMD, and the parse tree. Shall we move on to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
I find a very less few people attending the class. Around 148 members are attending out of 180 students. That's the first point. And the second point is most of them don't answer when a question is asked. The second point, and the third important point is if you don't come online with video from next class onwards, no attendance. Okay. Fine. So as you already know, when a grammar is called an ambiguous grammar, when you have more than one LMD, RMD, whether it is LMD or RMD, when you have more than one parse trees for a given grammar, then such kind of grammar is called as an ambiguous grammar. So if you see the previous example here, so this is an example of an ambiguous grammar. This is an example of an ambiguous grammar because you were able to construct more than one parse tree. You were able to construct more than one parse tree, and hence this grammar is an example of an ambiguous grammar. Are such kind of grammars fit for parsing? Are such kind of grammars fit for parsing? No. Okay. First
Bottom
step-
up.
Yeah. Only for bottom up. That too, operator precedence parser. That's it. Apart from that, you have LL1 parser, you have RDP, you have
No,
LR
ma'am.
parser. For all parsers, your grammar should be unambiguous. Your grammar should be unambiguous, and hence you have to eliminate this ambiguity. You have to eliminate this ambiguity. So before going to eliminating the ambiguity, I'll just tell you what are the requirements for the grammar before it is parsed. Yeah. So there are three different rules so that the grammar can be parsed using the top-down parser or the bottom-up parser. The first rule is the grammar should not be ambiguous. Ambiguous grammars are not desirable for parse trees. The first thing. What's the first rule for parsing? The grammar that is taken should not be ambiguous. Okay, should not be ambiguous. Second rule. The second rule is unambiguous grammar should be free from left recursion. I'll tell you what exactly is left recursion. Okay. First of all, the grammar that is taken should be unambiguous because ambiguous grammars are not desirable or suitable for parse trees. And the second rule is all the unambiguous grammars should be free from left recursion. Okay, the unambiguous grammar that you have taken should be free from left recursion, and these unambiguous grammars should be deterministic. Should be deterministic. Deterministic in the sense you should have fixed number of options. You should have fixed number of options for reducing the string from the grammar. So to have deterministic grammar, you have a concept called as left factoring. You have the concept called as left factoring. So before you take an example and try to parse the string using the grammar, you should make sure three things. What are the three things? The three things are, first of all, your grammar should not be ambiguous. And the second point is your grammar should be free from left recursion and your grammar should be deterministic. Okay, for deterministic, the grammar has to be left factored. The grammar has to be left factored. Okay, so these three rules are for top-down parsing. If you are using a top-down parser, you have three rules. The first rule is the grammar should be unambiguous. The second rule is the unambiguous grammar should free from left recursion and the grammar should be left factored. Okay, so only for the bottom-up parsing, that two operator precedence parser, only you can have the unambiguous grammar. The grammar, whatever is given as it is, can be taken and parsed in case of operator precedence parsers. Okay, so you'll have to remember three things. In case if the grammar is ambiguous, eliminate the ambiguity. If it has left recursion, eliminate the left recursion. And if the grammar is not deterministic, perform the left factoring and make it deterministic before you go for top-down parsing. Now in the next few topics, I'll just be explaining how to eliminate ambiguity, how to eliminate left recursion, and how to make use of left factoring in the grammar. Is that clear? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. So in case if the grammar is ambiguous, how do you eliminate this ambiguity? how do you eliminate this ambiguity is you have to take care of the associativity as well as the precedence. You have to take care of the associativity as well as the precedence and try to eliminate the ambiguity in the grammar and rewrite the grammar in such a way that you don't get more than one parse trees. Okay, so how do you eliminate ambiguity? You have to take care of the precedence when you're using different types of operators, that is addition, subtraction, multiplication or division, because multiplication has higher precedence over the addition and subtraction. So you have to take care of this precedence of operators and you have to take care of the associativity of operators. When associativity will come into picture, when you have an input string which makes use of same operators, that is plus plus or minus minus or multiplication multiplication, because both are having the same precedence. When you have two operators with the same precedence, associativity will come into picture. Okay, whether the expression or the input string has to be evaluated from left to right or from right to left. So when you take care of these two things, then you will be eliminating the grammar from ambiguity. Okay, we'll just take an example for eliminating the ambiguity from the grammar and we'll rewrite the rules. Okay. So this is one example. This is one example which we have seen. Even in your lab, you are writing the same grammar, I suppose. E derives, E plus E or E minus E, E into E divided by E within parenthesis and ID. Okay, so this grammar is said to be ambiguous. Why it is said to be ambiguous? Why this grammar is said to be ambiguous?
More than one parse tree.
More than one
Yes.
parse tree.
For the given input strings, I've taken two strings here. W1 ID plus ID plus ID is one string and the other string is W2 which is equal to ID plus ID into ID. So for these two strings W1 and W2, using the grammar E derives E plus E, E into E and ID generates more than one parse trees. Generates more than one parse trees and hence this grammar is said to be ambiguous. This grammar is said to be ambiguous. To eliminate ambiguity from this grammar, what you have to take care? I told precedence and associativity. Now let us see associativity, how associativity can be taken care. Okay, if you see here in the string W1, I'm sorry. So here if you see in the string W, here in the string W1, both the operators are plus and have the same precedence. Okay, so when you have same precedence, what you have to take care of? You have to take care of associativity. You have to take care of the associativity. That is, you have to either evaluate the expression from left to right or from right to left. When you take care of the associativity, do you get more than one parse trees?
No.
You are imposing a strict rule. You are imposing a strict rule on this input string. W1 is equal to ID plus ID plus ID. So when I say this expression has to be evaluated only from left to right, how many parse trees I can generate? I can generate only one parse tree. Are you not making the grammar unambiguous?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
ma'am,
you are making the grammar unambiguous. Even though the grammar given to you is an ambiguous one, you are imposing certain rules. What are those rules? The first rule is you are making it left associative. Left associative is you are making the parse tree to grow only in one direction. You are allowing the parse tree to grow in only one direction, which is left associative. Usually you make use of the left associative rule only. Okay. Are you solving the first problem? That is, if you have same precedence. And coming to the second problem, you have to solve the problem when there is highest precedence, higher precedence operators. If you check the string W2 is equal to ID plus ID into ID, which operator has got highest precedence?
Star.
Multiplication, right? So multiplication or star has got the highest precedence. So when you perform or when you impose a rule telling that the operator with highest precedence has to be evaluated first, then how many parse trees will you get? How many parse trees will you get? Only one parse tree. Now are you not eliminating ambiguity again? Yes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
this is the second rule how you are eliminating the ambiguity. So you can read this statement. In the string W2, star has highest precedence over plus. Hence, highest precedence operator should be present at the lowest level in the parse tree. It is a rule. It is a rule. An operator which is having the highest precedence will be present farther to the start symbol or the root node. Okay, the start symbol will be present at the top level, and the operator which is having the highest precedence will usually be present farther or far away to the start symbol. Okay, so when you impose such kind of rules, you are eliminating the ambiguity in the grammar. Okay, so we'll see after rewriting. Once you rewrite the grammar, the same grammar, imposing these two rules, how exactly the grammar looks like. Okay, so when you see this grammar, you can find that it is not having any ambiguity. To eliminate ambiguity, what you have done, you have used the concept of left recursion. You have used the concept of left recursion. So I've mentioned here the grammar must be left recursive. What is meant by left recursion or left recursive? The first symbol on the right hand side. The first symbol on the right hand side should be same as the left hand side symbol. Are all of the grammars having the same type? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when you make left recursive grammar, when you change the grammar to left recursive grammar, what happens? When you parse this, you can take a paper and parse this grammar and check E derives E plus T will grow only on the left hand side. It will grow only on the left hand side first, and then only you can reduce the right hand side symbols. Okay, it will grow only on the left hand side first. So if you come across operators with the same precedence, the parse tree grows only on the left hand side. And say suppose you're not having any any input which matches E derives E plus T. So you only have multiplication. Then what you can do is you can go with the second option. E derives T and T derives T star F. Okay, you can take this grammar and parse the input string W2. Parse the input string W2 and check if you can generate more than one parse trees. Can you do that now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. ID plus ID into ID. Parse it using this grammar. Parse it using the grammar. And just tell me how many parse trees you will get.
Only one.
Only one parse tree. Any doubts here? Eliminating ambiguity?
No, ma'am.
Oh,
Yeah. Somebody has told internet problem. Ma'am, till now attendance considered. Why are you worried, Yuvraj? Hmm? Shall we move on to the next slide? Usually the grammar given to you will be unambiguous, but still try to check before performing the parsing operation. Okay. In case, if you can generate more than one parse trees, then try to eliminate the ambiguity from the grammar. Eliminate the ambiguity from the grammar. Somebody has told repeat. Okay. Okay. So when a grammar is said to be ambiguous, a grammar is said to be ambiguous when for a given string and the given grammar, it generates more than one parse trees. Okay. So how do you eliminate this ambiguity? To eliminate ambiguity, consider the input string. We have considered here W1 and W2, where W1 is having operators which are having same precedence. Same operators having same precedence are used here. And to eliminate ambiguity, so you have to make use of two different rules. One rule is take care of the associativity. Take care of the associativity. Associativity is in which order you are going to evaluate the given expression. Okay, if I say evaluate the expression only from left to right, then it is called as left associative rule. Okay, I am imposing a rule telling that you have to evaluate the expression only from left to right. If I impose such a rule, you will come across only one parse tree. That is, you are taking care of the associativity of the evaluation of expression. Okay, and when you are imposing left associative rule, then your grammar should be rewritten in such a way that it is left recursive. Then the grammar should be rewritten in such a way that it is left recursive. What is left recursion or what is left recursive? If you see the grammar here, the right hand side, the first symbol on the right hand side of the production will be same as the left hand side symbol. And such kind of expressions or such kind of grammar is said to be left recursive grammar, where the first symbol on the right hand side is same as the left hand side symbol. Then such grammar is called as left recursive grammar, or it has got left recursion. Okay. The second rule to eliminate ambiguity is when you have operators with different precedences. When you have operators with different precedences, you have to make sure that the operator having the highest precedence gets evaluated first. Highest precedence gets evaluated first. So how do you make sure with this? You have to make sure that the highest precedence operator is evaluated first, and any expression having the highest precedence operator will be far away from the start symbol or the root node. Okay, so that is mentioned here clearly. Operator should be present at the lowest level in the parse tree. So when you make sure the associativity and precedence concept, you are imposing rules on associativity and precedence, and hence you are eliminating the ambiguity. So this was the unambiguous grammar which was given for an ambiguous grammar. E derives E plus E or E into E or ID. Okay. You're done with the first condition. What was the first condition? If you see here, you have the first condition that the grammar should be unambiguous. It should not be ambiguous. That is, it should not generate more than one parse tree. And once you're done with the ambiguity, the next condition is your grammar should not have left recursion. It should be free from left recursion. What is left recursion? I've already told you now what is meant by left recursion. Left recursion is when you have the first symbol on the right hand side same as that of the left hand side. Such kind of grammar is said to be left recursive. You have to eliminate this for your top down parsers. You have to eliminate this left recursion for your top down parsers. So we have rules for eliminating this left recursion. Okay, you can note down these rules. You can note down these rules. Have you noted down this grammar which is not having ambiguity? E derives E plus T or T. T derives T into F for F, and F derives ID. If you have taken down, you can apply the concept of eliminating left recursion on the same grammar. We will see that. So this is the general form of a left recursive grammar. This is the general form of a left recursive grammar, which is A derives A alpha or beta. Okay. Why it is left recursive? How can you identify whether it is left recursive or not?
Because left side and right side's starting symbols are same.
Right hand side first symbol is same as that of the left hand side symbol. Okay. Right hand side you have many symbols. Out of many symbols, the first symbol you are worried about. The right hand side first symbol is same as the left hand side symbol. Okay. And that is the reason this grammar is having left recursion, or this grammar is left recursive grammar. So how do you eliminate that? For eliminating, this is a general form. Okay. For eliminating left recursion, you have here. Instead of A derives A alpha or beta, you are changing it as A derives beta A dash, A dash derives alpha A dash or epsilon. Okay. You have to mug up this. You have to remember this. Okay. You have to remember this. This will not be given to you. So before you go to the LL1 parser, top-down parser. Okay, ma'am will be shortly sharing the videos of LL1 parser. So there you'll be using the concept of first, follow and all those things. So for LL1 parser, your grammar should not be ambiguous. Your grammar should not have left recursion, and your grammar should be deterministic. That is, left factoring should have taken place. Okay. So A derives A alpha or beta has been transformed into A derives beta A dash derives alpha A dash or epsilon. Does this grammar have left recursion?
No, ma'am.
Does this grammar have left recursion? No, because the
The
first
left
symbol
hand.
on the right hand side is beta and on the left hand side it is A. And in the second production, you can see the first symbol on the right hand side is alpha and on the left hand side it is A dash. Okay. So by transforming the grammar into this format, you're eliminating the left recursion. Shall we take an example?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so here this is a general form for single alpha and beta. In case if you have multiple alphas and betas, if you have multiple productions, then how do you eliminate that? It is same format, only thing you'll be numbering the alphas and betas. That's it. Okay. We'll just go to the example and we'll solve for a simple one. Okay. Fine. So E derives C plus T or T derives T into F for F, and F derives ID is an unambiguous grammar for an ambiguous grammar that we have seen already. Okay. Now check if this grammar is having left recursion. Is this grammar left recursive? Yes. Okay. The first production is also left recursive and the second production is also left recursive because the first symbol on the right hand side is same as the left hand side symbol here, E and E. And in the second production too, you have T as the first symbol on the right hand side, which is same as T on the left hand side. Okay. Now how do you transform this? How do you transform this? You had something A derives A alpha or beta. Now you have to group which is alpha and which is beta. Okay. Which is A, which is alpha and which is beta?
Beta is T.
Yeah.
Beta is T. Ma'am, beta is T.
Okay.
And A is E.
See, here A is
Plus T is together A alpha.
E is A. Okay. E is A plus T is alpha and T is beta. Okay, if you have taken down this expression, kindly take down these expressions. General form, A derives A alpha or beta, and A derives beta A dash derives alpha A dash or epsilon. If you have taken down this, here you can easily categorize. The first E is A plus T together is alpha and only T is beta. Plus is also a terminal symbol. Plus is also a terminal symbol. Okay. So in this first production, E on the left hand side is A and E on the right hand side is also A, capital A, non-terminal A. Plus T is alpha or T. You have T, only T. T is your beta. Okay. When you rewrite that, A derives beta A dash. A derives beta A dash. Here E is A. So E derives, what is beta? T is beta. T E dash.
E dash.
T E dash. Okay. And E dash derives alpha E dash or epsilon. Alpha E dash or epsilon. Okay. Is that clear?
Plus T E dash means E plus T into E dash, like that only, no?
Where? No. You try to split here.
Ma'am, this one E dash derives plus T E dash and
Go to the,
epsilon.
yeah.
Or epsilon.
See, when you come here, I'm sorry. When you come here, E derives E plus T or T. So A derives A alpha plus T is alpha. This plus T totally is alpha.
Okay, ma'am.
And this single T is called as beta. The single T is called as beta.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. When you rewrite this, how do you rewrite? A derives A alpha or beta? You got what is A? A is E. Alpha is plus T and beta is just T here in the first production. So when you rewrite it, A derives beta A dash. A dash is a new symbol here. A dash is a new symbol which was not present in the earlier grammar. Okay. Beta A dash. Beta was T. So T E dash and E dash derives, that is A dash derives alpha A dash or epsilon. So alpha is plus T. A dash is E dash or epsilon. Okay. So again, check the second production. In the second production, is the second production again left recursive?
Yes, ma'am. T and T.
Is the second production again left recursive? Yes,
Right
it
most
is.
and left most.
Yeah, it is left recursive because the first symbol on the right hand side is same as the left hand side symbol. Now again apply that concept. A derives alpha, A derives A alpha or beta, and then reduce it to T derives F T dash derives star F T dash or epsilon. And F derives ID. There you don't have any left recursion. It is just a terminal symbol. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Because this is very, very important. We will share you some questions where you are supposed to eliminate this left recursion, eliminate the ambiguity, eliminate the left recursion. Okay.
Ma'am,
So
try-
Sukruta is same even online. Vimla ma'am, are you there? Okay. So we'll do with this left factoring and then I'll stop. Okay. Fine. Because you have three things that has to be eliminated. One is ambiguity. The second one is left recursion. And the third one is the grammar has to be left factored. Okay. So we have eliminated the ambiguity here. Then we have eliminated the left recursion. And we'll see, we'll take example of another simple grammar and try to see what exactly is left factoring. Okay. So this is the general form of left factoring, where A derives alpha beta 1 or alpha beta 2. So what is common here? Usually in mathematical expressions, what you do, you remove the common factor and put other things in a bracket, parenthesis, right? The same thing over here. So when you have this production, A derives alpha beta 1 or alpha beta 2, which is common in these two things?
Alpha.
Alpha. Okay. So what I'll do here is the general form. This is a general form. Okay. A derives alpha A dash. Okay. And A dash derives beta 1 or beta 2. Are you able to understand this general form of left factoring?
Yes,
You can
ma'am.
note down in a sheet of paper.
Yes, ma'am.
You can note down. Okay. A derives alpha beta 1 or alpha beta 2. Out of these two options, take out the common factor. The common factor is alpha. So A derives alpha A dash. Now write another new production for this A dash which has got different values. Okay. So A dash derives beta 1 or beta 2.
Plus beta 2.
Okay. Shall we move on to the example?
Yes, ma'am.
This is the general form. Keeping this general form, you will have to solve the problems. Okay, fine. So this is an example
Yes,
to
ma'am.
eliminate the left factoring. So you have a grammar, only one production with different options I've given. A derives ABD.
Will take AB common.
Yeah,
and
among both,
then
among these two options,
D
AB
and
is
E will be
common.
there.
Okay, so A derives AB,
AB
and whichever is not common, represent it as a separate production here. Represent it as a separate production with the name A dash. Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
AB, A dash. So A dash is whichever was
B
not
or-
common, whichever was different among this entire set of productions, that is D or E.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what are the three rules for top-down parsing? The grammar should not be ambiguous. Eliminate the ambiguity. The grammar should not have any left recursion. Eliminate the left recursion. For how do you
And
eliminate
left
the left
factoring.
recursion? Using this general format. Okay, and then eliminate the perform the left factoring. Make the grammar deterministic. Okay, so this is the general form and this is the example. Hope it is clear.